I wonder if these people who have higher expectations actually get more disappointed because they just expected more from it and it didn't happen. And then they're just left out with this lack of connection or of like genuine or like meaningful connection for them, the way they define it. And maybe that's what infuses the loneliness.
Welcome back, everyone, to another weekly Friday coffee chat. We're sitting here and we're each having a matcha. And today we will be talking about a topic that has been on our minds a lot lately. And so it's going to be about friendships. And we started thinking about this a lot. We're sure you have heard of the loneliness epidemic and how this has been a thing for the last few years. And it's made us think a lot about, the friendships that we have. Because, of course, our families play a big role in us not feeling lonely. But it's also a lot about the friendships. And it made us think about adult friendships a lot. But before we dive into it, I actually looked at the statistics, right? Because everyone's talking about the loneliness epidemic, but what does that actually mean? And I looked it up, and I looked up the US figures. And guess how many people feel like frequently or always lonely?
I think I saw somewhere that, at least for depression, there's like 1 in 4 people feel depressed. So I would say...
Would you say more or less? Well, actually, so I have it right here. So I'm going to read it to make sure, I get the numbers correctly. But basically, 53% of Americans between the ages of 18 and 44 feel frequently or always lonely. And these are statistics from
very sad,
last year or so. And it's similar across the world as well. So of course, this is American data, but it is actually a worldwide problem. And I was like, this is actually crazy because it's like around half the population feels like mostly or always lonely. And that is crazy to me.
I mean, it does make sense given all of these newest technology that we have. I mean, if we look at, let's say, even a very mundane situation like going on public transport, people are on their phones with their headphones on. They basically create this bubble and they don't want to interact with anyone. You go into a shop, for instance, and you don't really want to like focus on, just talking to the people. You would rather go to the self-checkout than go to the one where you interact with a person to avoid the interaction.
But do you think it's the interaction, or do you think that people have this thought that, oh, you know what? I feel like it's more efficient, it's quicker, it's faster. But maybe it is also the interaction, actually.
It could be both. I think it could be both. Yeah. I feel like in general, people would rather go, let's say, if they need customer support, they would rather go on a chat than call.
Oh, that is such a big one. That is such a big one. And I never understood that. Because I'm like, oh my God, until I actually write things down. It's basically like time has passed. It's so much easier to call. But that is true. We do see this trend of more text-based than actually face-to-face conversation.
Exactly.
Everything has become a lot more digital, which, I don't know, have we unlearned to have connect. Interactions and how to connect? Yeah. And maybe actually, to take a step back, what is also important here to mention is what loneliness actually is, right? So we talk about over half of the people who were surveyed feel lonely. But lonely doesn't mean that, or let's put this differently. When you're alone, it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to feel lonely, right? So lonely really is a much deeper feeling of, that there is a lack of meaningful connection to other people, or you feel isolated by others, right? You can be alone. You can spend the day alone and not feel lonely, but loneliness really is this strong feeling of isolation. And I read somewhere, and I'm probably going to get the statistics wrong here because I didn't write it down, but apparently loneliness is just as bad as smoking like 15 cigarettes a day.
Oh, really?
Yeah, for health.
For
in
health
the long
outcomes.
Term. Yeah.
It does make sense. I mean, Again, we've talked about this in previous episodes as well, that we literally only see the effects of bad mental health when they become physical, but the bad consequences are still there, even if we don't pay attention to them.
Absolutely. And I guess it is like very much the irony that we're so connected than ever. Like we can literally have video calls with people who are on a different continent, right? We can connect with people we don't even know who live somewhere completely else through social media. And yet still we feel so lonely.
It's a paradox, I think. It's almost like, and even when you look at the advertisements for these social media platforms, it's all about connection. It's all about making sure that you connect with your friends, that you get to meet new people, that you get to see entertaining content that you like. And yet, at the same time, the statistics are very sad and they raise a lot of questions on like, why does this even happen? And what we think is that the loneliness epidemic has something to do with the way we connect with others, and specifically the way we make friends as adults. That can even go back to teenage years as well, but I think it's more relatable for us to talk about friendships in adulthood, because it just seems like we've unlearned how to do that well.
Basically, the question that we want to ask during today's chat is, well, do we suck at maintaining friendships when we grow up? And do we also suck making new friends when we grow up, right? So what happens with the people that we have been friends with?
Yeah.
And why does it seem so incredibly difficult to meet new people, to connect with them meaningfully, and to connect with them to a point where we consider them our good friends? And so I'm going to go into that today. And I feel like it's also kind of like a very personally relevant topic, right? Because I feel like if I think about it, up until university days, it was never an issue to meet new people, to connect with them. But then I feel like once you enter the workforce, for me personally, once I started working, it's like, I see my colleagues every day. But do I consider them my friends? Most of them not.
Yeah. No, it is really about a change in priorities. But before we get into adult friendships, we really wanted to take a step back and really try to dive into, how do we even make friendships? How do we as human beings learn to become friends with others? And of course, it all starts with childhood, because this is when we get socialized with other children. We learn who likes what. And we usually tend to make friends in childhood based on our interests. For instance, maybe we have the same hobbies. Maybe we like the same Barbie dolls. Maybe we go to the same extracurricular activities. And this is where we make friends. And we almost have like a shared reality. And we're all at the same stage of life. So we have more to connect about. And this is also how we learn to make friends in general. That these friends we need to connect with, they have the same interests as we do. And maybe they're at the same life stage as we do. And therefore, we can relate to them in that sense.
But also, it's a lot about the time we spend with those people. If you think about it, you know, when you're in kindergarten or in school, you spend every day with the same people. And it's usually a smaller group of people as well. And so this exposure and basically the time you're forced to spend with them also helps, create those friendships. And some of them are going to be lifelong.
You know what's funny? That in school you still call them colleagues, but they can become friends. And then with workplaces, you call them colleagues, but the friendships there are a bit tricky.
Wait. Where do you call them colleagues?
In school.
In school?
Yeah. Or
classmates. Nowhere.
Really?
Classmates, yeah. Colleagues, no.
Yeah, we say colleagues.
That
like
is so interesting. No,
class
we don't have
colleagues, like classmates, but it has the same definition in that sense. Like, you call them a colleague.
Do you use the same word for colleagues at work then as well? Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess there is like some cultural differences there as well, which is super interesting because for us it wasn't like that at all. So it's like classmates is a specific word that we use for classmates. and then a different one for friends, and then a different one for colleagues at work. So colleagues for me is always work related. Like there's nothing else.
There's no school involved.
No. It's always like, it's always like adult, like
your
job.
Job. Serious.
That is so interesting.
I think we were just like really reared to take ourselves very seriously since we were kids. Like already in school, you've got colleagues, okay?
But isn't it interesting that already that, just like by the language that is being used, like it creates these certain ideas and like how you define certain things, right? Like what does a friend mean? There's also differences there, culturally.
True.
Anyway, but yeah, basically, growing up, we spend a lot of time with the same people. We have a lot of time for our interests as well when we're younger. And you connect with those people. You see them a lot. They're around. And you basically have all the time to sit with them in school and chat during the breaks or during school, depending on, how what your preference used to be. But then also, when we move into adulthood, things change quite drastically. And with adulthood, we mean probably once you start working as well.
I think it starts with graduation, really. I
Which
think
graduation?
High school graduation is when this is your first, let's say, major breakup, if I may say so.
Yeah.
Because you've made friends in your teenage years, and now everybody's kind of going on their own path. They're moving on to university. Maybe they're completely changing, the country that they live in, or they're moving to another city. And the group that you had while you were in high school, the group of friends that you had while you were in high school, maybe those people will continue to stay your friends. But then there's a lot of barriers that start being kind of infused in our lives when these people leave. So I do believe that high school is our first major breakup with friends, and then uni graduation.
I have to say, I also feel like it's, the one thing is, okay, when it comes to maintaining friendships, because friendships might not make it into your next life phase after high school graduation. But I feel like university is still like, at least you can make new friends very easily. Yeah. And then I feel like then there's the next breakup, let's say, which is after uni. And then
this is when shit goes down.
You move
for real.
into like proper adulthood and working life. And I feel like this is a massive switch that a lot of us have experienced, where it's like, okay, we're getting so much more busy. We have less time. We spend a lot of time at work. We don't necessarily work with our friends, right? It's like different at university or different at high school, where you have to be at uni classes or at school for like a considerable amount of time. But this is also where we made our friendships. Yeah. Right. But at work, this changes. And that is not necessarily the case that you're working together with like 4, close friends of yours. That doesn't necessarily happen. And at the same time, I feel like it becomes so difficult then to also just maintain your friendships. Also, I feel like not everyone is in the same city.
I think if I think about myself, like most of my friends are not in the city that I live in. And then that also imposes a lot of heterogeneity, if I may add a scientific word there, which basically means that everybody has their own reality and there's less and less commonalities. So you maybe don't share the same context. I think that the one context that we all share is that we're all working and there's stuff to complain about. And there's stuff to complain about whenever you call. So that's a common context, I feel like, with friends. But it is very different because we also tend to have different fates and different life stages. Some people focus on making or creating a family right away after college. Other people focus on building their careers. Other people go traveling and, you never know what corner of the earth they're going to be in. So it is really a lot of variety in how these people how their lives are unfolding. And I think that's also what creates a bit of disconnect because it's
the similarities
exactly.
become less and less. Basically.
Exactly. And then you call with them And it's almost like, oh, hey, how's it going? Oh, yeah, this is what happened. This is what happened. This is what happened. And it almost feels like a report of what has been happening in your life, but not necessarily moments of connection.
I feel like this is such a big aspect of it. And I feel like this is really kind of because we don't share an everyday life with them anymore.
Yeah.
You know, with the people, I don't know, for example, at uni or at school, you were seeing them every day. You were experiencing things together.
Yeah.
And I feel like this becomes a lot less when we grow up, because then we meet up to catch up, which is great. But how many times do you actually meet with your friends now and you actually make new experiences together and new memories? And I feel like this is such a big part where it's like, it's nice to catch up, but when it's only catching up,
yeah,
and it's nothing new, like a shared experience is created, how can you deepen this connection? It's difficult. Yeah. Before we continue, make sure to like this video and let us know in the comments what your best hack is to meet new people and make new friends. And also don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss another Friday Coffee Chat.
I have to say, I feel like with maintaining friendships, the way to maintain friendships in adulthood is to create new memories together, because that is going to keep your friendship fresh in that sense. It's like keeping passion in a relationship, you know?
It all requires effort. Like everyone needs to put in the effort to, you know,
exactly,
kind of like make it grow and strengthen the relationship.
And then of course, as adults, we learn that not everything is so pink and so amazing as we thought it was. We have some disappointments. We have maybe even some betrayals here and there. We tend to see that people may not be or act the way that they say they would.
Yeah.
And that can create a lot of trust issues that can also affect how we open up to potentially new friendships as well.
And you know, I think the interesting thing here is actually that if I think about it, like when we were younger or, you know, during university days, like there would be fights with people, like friendships would end. There would be, you know, breaking of trust. But I almost feel like, you know what, it's in adulthood, it almost seems a lot more significant.
Yeah.
Because our fights back then were maybe about something that now we think about and we're like, that was so silly. Exactly. Like that was so insignificant in the grand scheme of things. But as we grow up and we have more responsibilities, or maybe we also go through stages in life that are very rough and very serious. And maybe when then there is, you know, a breach of trust in a way, I feel like that makes it a lot, like it affects us a lot more.
Definitely.
It affects our trust levels also towards new people. And that is an interesting switch, I feel, because there's always like, you know, some friendships are forever and some friendships are for a season, right?
Yeah, exactly.
People might behave rudely or in not so nice ways, but I feel like it affects us a lot more now. Than back then.
We do tend to become more picky with the people that we spend our time with, because we have such limited resources. And especially, you know, as you've mentioned, we entered the workforce, right? This is taking up a lot of our time, a lot of our resources. So when we want to connect with others, we want these connections to be meaningful. And we also then tend to only have certain friends that recharge us in that sense, and we stick to what we know, and we don't really focus on, oh, let me go and find new people now, you know?
That is very true. And I also feel like, you know, I mean, how many times have you thought, I don't have time for this? I mean, I feel like this is like one of the sentences that we like to use to describe situations where we're like, I'm not going to invest any effort into that. I don't want that. And at the same time, it's interesting what you said, where it's like, I feel like we're craving those deep connections and deep talks and stuff like that. And at the same time, do we do this?
No.
And do we do this
Mostly
often
not.
enough? Or do we stay very shallow and it's a catch up and then we need to run to our next meeting or whatever type of responsibility we have, where it's I feel like there's a paradox there. There is a gap. There is an inconsistency between what we want and to what extent we actually put in the effort for that.
I wonder whether that has anything to do with our expectations of what a deep connection means.
What do you mean?
Sometimes I feel like people just have a very different definition of what friendship is. Like for some people, a shallow conversation, catching up for an hour over coffee, that is enough to connect. And they don't feel, or they wouldn't label that as a shallow connection. They would just say, oh yeah, we hung out, it was really great, but they wouldn't really focus on, was this deep? Is this what I wanted? Is this what I needed? Is this a kind of connection that recharges me or makes me feel like I can relate or be connected to others? And then you've got other people who have different expectations about what a friendship is, and they're more of a, I want deep connections kind of people. And maybe they're the ones to be more disappointed by a catch up over coffee that doesn't go beyond what has happened recently and doesn't really go beyond the mundane stuff, let's say.
So what you're saying is like basically this, some people might find just, a pleasant interaction very meaningful, whereas some others need something that goes beyond, let's say, pleasantries.
Exactly.
For them to feel like, oh, that was meaningful.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. It's so individual, right? It really depends like what your need is and whether what you're getting kind of is fulfilling this need for connection. And there might be differences 100%.
I wonder if these people who have higher expectations actually get more disappointed because they just expected more from it and it didn't happen. And then they're just left out with this lack of connection or of like genuine or like meaningful connection for them, the way they define it. And maybe that's what infuses the loneliness feeling.
I'm also wondering what makes you want like, a deeper conversation to feel like this is being meaningful. Like in a way, what is it that drives those differences? Can you tell we are psychologists?
I would love to know.
It would be super fascinating. Like, okay, what exactly is it? Does it have to do with, are you an extrovert? Are you an introvert? Or, I mean, I don't know. I guess every one of us is craving a deep connection to a certain extent. But indeed, how you get that might be very different for everyone. Anyway. I feel like we're going on a tangent here.
Yeah,
that's
thoughts
a whole other chat.
Now my thoughts are going, but maybe if you feel like you are deeply connected, let's say with your partner, with your family, maybe you're okay with having more shallow connections because your
friendships.
Your cup of deep connections was filled by, 5 people or so, and you are okay with having more shallow connections. But maybe if you crave more deep connections, so you have like a bigger cup, that needs to be filled, then you get disappointed. Anyway,
Tina, I feel like we have
research
opened
models.
A can of worms because
we're not going
this is a whole other thing of like, can friends give you more than what your partner and family give you? But anyway, let's not get there.
Oh because my God, that would be a whole new conversation.
I know. No, we need to stop it right here, actually. Because we also have a few other things that we really wanted to talk about, actually. And thinking about, spending a lot of time at work. What about trauma bonding? Because I feel like that's a real biggie. And I feel like both of us have also experienced this, where we've been in situations where when you go through hard situations with the same people, already you are probably gonna have like this glue keeping you together because you went through very hard times together.
Exactly. I mean, I have friends like that, I wouldn't like call it like trauma bonding, like nothing really bad happened in that sense. But
trauma with a small t.
Yeah, exactly. But maybe you were all exposed to a toxic workplace and then you left that workplace. But the fact that you both went through all of that shit together, that created such a bond. that really allowed you to foster even more meaningful connections that go even beyond that workplace. Like, I have friends who I keep contact with, and we're not working in the same place anymore, thankfully.
But you started out as friends at work, and it was like, damn, this is so difficult. But like, we've been through this together.
Exactly. And I also wonder whether this may be also happening with, let's say, like war veterans, for instance, that they have this special bond with people that they went through hardships with, that just regardless of where you are or what life stage you're in, there is a certain bond that is almost unbreakable.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I feel like maybe this is a new source of friendships, actually, in adulthood, and maybe like very specifically when it comes to friends at work.
Yeah.
Your work besties, right? Whatever your work might be in that regard. But I also feel like, you know what? Sometimes I'm also thinking about interactions that we have, and like thinking about how adults, how we think about interactions. And like sometimes the word that pops in my head a lot of the times, right? Especially when I think about, okay, making new friends, right? The word that pops in my mind is awkwardness.
Yeah.
I feel like we have gotten to a point for whatever reason. And I don't know if this is like an age thing of like between, 25 to, I'm just going to say now, like 40 or something. Or whether it is a generational thing, or whether it is like, I don't know what it is, but I feel like we feel so awkward to just talk to people that we don't know. Definitely. Like, just start a conversation.
If I remember, the first time I heard the word awkward, I think I was 12 or so. And I didn't really
That is very early, by the way.
I didn't understand its meaning in the beginning. I was like, what does that even mean? Like, what does awkward even mean? But then I watched this movie. There was this movie about like Wallflower or something like that. Remember? Like, there was this teenager.
It rings a bell, but I have not watched it.
Anyway, The Perks of Being a Wallflower, that one. And apparently that was the movie or the book that, in my circle of friends, invented awkwardness. Because you've got like this shy person.
That is so interesting.
I don't know. Like, I remember that as the origin of awkwardness. Like, you got this shy person who doesn't really want to like open up and like doesn't really know how to navigate social interactions, and they're awkward, And I almost felt like some people really found themselves in these kind of characters, and they felt validated. But maybe a lot of people felt like that, and that's how awkwardness became a phenomenon that we all now talk about, almost like a generational term, if I may say so.
It is so interesting though, isn't it? Because I feel like now that I'm thinking about it, I think there's a very big cultural component there as well. There's definitely cultures where small talk is not only very common, but also very much incentivized, and like it would be rude not to engage in small talk, even if you don't know a person. Like, I remember when I was in Australia, anyway, it was a big building where I used to live, so there was an elevator. And so it was so weird not to say hello when you step into the elevator, or when someone else steps into the elevator, even if you didn't know each other, and you're probably not going to see each other again, right? But it was weird not to say hello. Like, it was almost like very rude, right? And then if I think about Germany, if I do this in Germany, it depends a little bit on, honestly, like the age of the other person, because my impression is that, let's say, older people are very like social and super open, and they will say hello, and or if you say hello, they will smile at you and say hello back. And I think this is so beautiful. But I feel like, our age, sometimes people will look at you like,
exactly, that's
why are you saying hello? But I feel like it's a cultural thing where it's like, it's maybe a big surprise to them of like,
I have to say, I don't get it. I really don't get it. Because I remember when I was little, if you went into an elevator, like in your apartment building, and you didn't say hello, your mom will know. And you will get...
because it's considered rude.
It's considered like, that person, that lady, whoever, my neighbor from the 5th floor told me you didn't say hello in the elevator. What happened? And then you'd be like, sorry. But now, because like I also like moved a couple of times, and I notice now you go into the elevator, you say hello, some people don't even reply.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're a human being, just say hi.
Yeah. But you know what? I think that is a very interesting, I guess, just observation. And I'm sure there are so many different aspects and factors that play into why a person wouldn't say hello or would say hello. And I'm sure it goes like further than just cultural reasons. But thinking about it, it's a bit of a problem, right? It's a bit of a problem, especially when we move to a new city or we find ourselves in a very new environment where we don't know anyone. I feel like it does kind of put this barrier up of like, how are we going to start talking to someone now? I don't know anyone. Like, how am I going to start a conversation? And I feel like that sometimes really kind of makes it difficult for us to connect and make new friendships.
Exactly. And especially if you like beat yourself down for whenever you get rejected. I also feel like it's a certain fear of rejection, that you're going to be open to other people and you're going to want to start a conversation and you're going to get the side eye basically.
Yeah.
And then you're going to feel rejected because that doesn't feel really good. But what that really creates is a consequence of, this perpetual cycle, because we don't make the first contact. We feel lonelier because we don't broaden our group of friends or even our group of acquaintances that could potentially or eventually become friends. And then we feel lonelier, and then we feel even more awkward, and so on. So it really just is a perpetual cycle, almost like a spiral.
There is a reason why there is a loneliness epidemic. And again, there's different factors that play into that. But I feel like we have lost a little bit, we have forgotten about our ability to connect with people in a deep, meaningful way, but also connect with new people. I feel like we haven't learned that a little bit.
Definitely.
But I also feel like, what we just talked about, the fact that we feel so awkward and that it is taking us, it's putting up the barrier to reach out to people, especially if we don't know them. That leads very well actually into some of the tips that we would like to share with you guys in terms of how can we improve our friendships and how can we make sure, if you find yourself in a situation where you're in a new environment, you don't know anyone, and you would like to meet new people and make new friends. And that first tip is to, even when you feel awkward, just force yourself a little bit outside your comfort zone and say that hello. And even if people don't respond or look at you hello, I guess, don't let that bash you down, and don't let it keep you from also the next time say hello. In my experience, it's just be you and just be open, and the right people will be open back.
Exactly. It's almost like a magnet, right? So you have to
attract
the
right
magnet
people
first, and then they're gonna connect with you too. But I also have to say, it is about thinking back on what we've mentioned in the beginning of the episode. We used to make friends based on interests. And I've also noticed there are so many ways to make friends as adults also based on interests. And there's also a lot of communities in place. For instance, if you like Pilates, if you like going for a matcha, what are the chances that people like you go to the same places? What are the chances that you might find people there who you can connect with? You never know, but it's always worth a try, because you go to places where you can find people like you are. And I think it's also really important to try to go there by yourself.
Yes.
Because it's much more difficult to connect with other people when you are already with a friend. It's also much more, let's say, strange for others to approach you when you are with a friend.
100%. You won't be approached that easily.
Exactly. Because you almost have something going on and people don't want to interfere. So just go and talk to the person you go to the same Pilates class with. Go and talk to the person that maybe you always see in the gym, in the changing room, and you've been saying hello to, but maybe you can take it a step further. So it is really about going where you might think your people are.
You know how like men have those gentlemen clubs or whatever? That are like super, I don't know, you need an invitation membership and stuff like that. I like to think of Pilates studios as our social clubs. And in my experience, it works so well. It works wonders. These are like the coolest people there sometimes. But yeah, these were like 2 tips when you want to make new friends and connect with new people. But also, you know, it also comes back to the friendships that we have and intentionally making an effort to maintain them and making time for our friends and making time for experiences that will help us bond more and create new memories. This is also super important to just make sure that these friendships don't go anywhere and that they stay with us for as long as we want them to.
So you guys, we hope that this episode has given you a glimpse into why we suck at making friendships and how to get out of this rut, and maybe also how to find sources of potential friendships and inspiration for how to nurture the friendships that you already have. And this was a very, I think, wholesome episode, at least for me.
It's an important topic, isn't it? Like, who are we without the people that we love the most?
Exactly.
And friends are part of that.
If you've been enjoying this episode, support our Friday coffee chats by buying us a virtual coffee. You can find the link in the episode description. And send this episode to a friend you haven't caught up with in a while.
See you next week.
Bye.